So I'm Vivek Vats, David Chopra from Gurugram. We have CV Ananya from Mumbai. We have Shambhavi Shandil from Muzaffarpur, Bihar, Lychee City.
Good afternoon. My name is David Chopra. I'm from Scottish International School, and I'll be speaking in favor of the topic that reservations are a good approach for natives of the state in jobs. First of all, I'll be defining a few terms. Natives. Natives mean domiciles or citizens of the state. A more commonly used term is sons of the state. Second of all, reservations. Seclusion of a certain numerical percentage of jobs or posts for certain sections of society. Now, there are many reasons why reservations for the domicile people are a better approach in our country. There are they are grouped into three main reasons. Number one, legal reasons, which talk about the legal permissibility of such a law. Number two, social reasons, and number three, economic reasons. Coming on to firstly the legal permissibility of domicile reservations. Now, while Article 16 talks about equality of all before the Constitution, Article 16 subclause 3 of the Constitution of India provides an exception for Article 16 subclause 2 state is saying that the Parliament may make a law prescribing a requirement of residence for jobs in a particular state. Second of all, equality enshrined in the Constitution is not mathematical equality and does not mean all citizens will be treated alike without any distinction. To this effect, the Constitution underlines two distinct aspects which together form the essence of equality law: non-discrimination among equals and affirmative action to equalize the unequals, hence taking steps that are more in favor of those who are unequal in nature to bring them on that same level. Now, there are certain examples of domicile reservations as well. So constitutionally, some states have special protections under Article 371. Andhra Pradesh under Section 371 Part B has powers to have direct recruitment of local cadre in specified areas. Second of all, in Uttarakhand, Class 3 and Class 4 jobs are reserved for locals. And the center issued a notification reserving jobs for Jammu and Kashmir domiciles, expanding the definition to central government employees who had served in the erstwhile state for over 10 years. In Assam, a committee has submitted its report for implementation of a key provision of the 1985 Assam Accord, recommending reservation in jobs for those who can trace their ancestry in the state before 1951. And the State Assembly in Haryana has passed the Haryana State Employment of Local Candidates Bill 2020, paving way for more employment opportunities for locals in the private sector. Coming on to the second factor, which is social reasons. The biggest social reason is the prevention of brain drain. Now, it's a very common term that we have heard about skilled labor leaving our country to go to other countries for better job opportunities. Now, the real problem why this phenomenon has not been solved is because we want to tackle the problem at a national level. The
30 seconds to
real
go, David.
solution. Yes, my last name means the real solution here is to tackle the problem at a state and a grassroots level by providing more opportunities to locals themselves and thus preventing brain drain and other factors, and also providing a lot of employment to them and curbing unemployment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to Ananya Venugopal, CV Ananya Venugopal, right?
Yes, sir. I
Yes.
usually use my initials.
Okay.
Can I start?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so hi, I'm Ananya. I'm from Mumbai. I'm a final year engineering student and I debate as a passion. So today I'm going to be speaking for the motion that reservation of jobs for the natives of the state should be done. It's very simple. The concept is very simple. When you have a term called mixed economy, which is what India is, it's a simple provision that the public and private sector should be on a level playing field. And when the public is offering 27% jobs for natives, then why not the private sector? That is the question that arises. Now, here it is important to note that there are three types of jobs. There are the blue collar jobs, which are the semi skilled or unskilled jobs. There are the white collar jobs, which call for an office like environment. And there are the pink collar jobs, which involve interactions with customers or locals or things like that, right? So now, if you look at our recent history, Haryana has declared 75% jobs for locals, Madhya Pradesh has declared 70%, Andhra Pradesh has declared 75%, Karnataka has declared 70%, and a lot of other states as well. So it calls to question why. So when you see these provisions, they're mostly for companies that seek some sort of financial aid from the government. So what happens is these private sector companies, they take money from government banks to finance their operations. And then as we know, the rates of defaults are very high. Let me put it as an example for you. Consider the mineral wealth of India, right? It is mostly in the tribal belt. And when suppose a company comes in and they want to do mining, so what is the first thing they do? They evacuate the locals. What happens to the locals? The locals become migrant laborers who move to other places, and these migrant laborers are forced to work at dirt cheap prices, lesser than daily wage sometimes, and their living conditions, etc., are horrible. It's so simple to fight this by just providing reservations for those people in the jobs of that state. So now, what are the major issues that happen when you try to enforce this kind of reservation, right? The first thing is the companies throw up a lot of companies of the private sector, they throw up a lot of opposition. So we have bodies like ASOCAM that say that there is not enough talent pool. So if you impose the reservations, it could lead to a loss of profit for the company because of the lack of skilled labor. So how do you fight this? The solution is you keep the reservations only in the blue collar and the pink collar jobs, so that you're hiring the natives only to interact with the locals, or to do the semi or unskilled labor, which they are going to be doing any which ways. So the next thing that they say is that these reservations are against constitutional provisions. Constitutional provisions like equality, etc., etc. And as my colleague Divit pointed out, these equality, there is a lot more definition to that. Equality is for people who are, you can enforce that when people are already equal, but they're not equal at all, which is why we need to provide them some backing so that they can become equal. I would just like to point out in the end that in Madhya Pradesh, the Kamal Nath-led government actually did this. They made 70% of jobs for locals, and unemployment fell drastically because it creates an opportunity for all. And it's not just our country. There are even countries like America that are fighting to provide job for the locals, because after all, this is how the even for Make in India and everything, this becomes a very important factor. This is what I feel. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And now we'll go to Dipansh. Dipansh, you are ready?
Yes, sir. I'm speaking against that it is a bad approach.
Yes.
Since it's already been explained as to what reservation is, I, Dipansh Javrani from Hansraj College, will talk to you exactly on the basis of logic why it is a bad approach. Firstly, let us understand reservation is for people who are either A, financially disadvantaged, or B, socially disadvantaged, for example, Dalits and people who have been largely implicated for the implications of the caste system in and of themselves. A lot of times when we go ahead and reserve on the basis of regions, people don't belong to either of these categories and can go ahead and meritoriously gain admission into any sort of institution or jobs that they want, but they go ahead and take up that place importantly just because they belong to a particular region, right? We think the trade-off that you're making to actually help the disadvantaged people is a massive one to undertake as individuals and as the authorities deciding on the basis of the reservation. Arguments that need to be kept in mind. Firstly, stagnancy of talent, right? There are different states that specialize in different techniques. For example, if you're an automobile engineer, you would rather want to work in Maharashtra, but if you're a software engineer, you would much rather want to work in Bangalore and in Tamil Nadu, right? Keeping that in mind, if you reserve those companies only for the natives, a person might not be able to migrate to different countries just because the access is made a lot more difficult, right? He has to remain in the avenues limited to what their state is more proficient in. Secondly, technology and education sharing will become a lot more difficult because the natives will remain secluded to the state that they are limited to. Keeping that in mind, since there is no incentive for them to move out of their very own state, the new technology sharing and the technological implications of their research will be much more difficult to disseminate with the rest of the world. Thirdly, the overall development of the industry or even the economy will be hampered because understand that there will be only certain regions only proficient in a certain amount of development and research projects. The other parts of the society will never be able to, let's say, implicate that on a larger level. The government can't come up and say that, we will just give them the semi and unskilled jobs, because that is literally what you will get either way, right? Because the labor lives in that state, and because their transport cost is anyway lesser, you will either hire people from the state in and of itself. Lastly, we need to understand the lack of skills that you will be taking, right? If you go ahead and give them 70% reservation, any person who will live in that state literally knows that that job is given to them on a platter. They don't necessarily have to go through the levels of competition that you have to in other parts of the state, because you know that there is an immense amount of competition to land a similar job. Since you're already reserved for that job, you will not have an incentive to work exponentially harder or to stand out from the rest of the crowd to make your place within the industry and the society as a whole. We think at that point the lack of incentive will result in lack of skills, experience, and immense motivation among the employees. And all of this makes sure that reservation no, and but merit and other forms of reservation like social and financial disadvantage should be taken into consideration.
Okay, great. So now we'll go to Shambhavi.
Hello everyone, I am Shambhavi and I will be speaking for the motion that reservation in jobs for natives of state is a good approach. I believe that it is a good approach because not only it increases the employment percentage and helps retain cultural and traditions, it also provides employment to local artisans, thus ensuring continuity and practice of vulnerable crafts. And it reduces immigration, which is a very huge problem, and people tend to shift. And I believe one thing is to be clear that when talking of state, we are not mentioning to a specific regions or states like we have in India, but taking the country as a state, I think it is a good approach, and it helps to retain people. That is, when you're talking about the nation, then people tend to go to USA or other countries where they have better payments, but it will have reservation in jobs will help to reduce that. It also boosts a state economy and brings socio-economic stability, and heritage and stable financial conditions open up more opportunities for the residents, bringing better education and healthcare. It also contributes to per capita income of the state, which overall boosts the economy. And uh, reservation in jobs for native state is a good approach as it helps maintain the ethnicity while providing employment opportunities. And uh, it also yes, that's it.
Okay. So, okay. So now we'll go to Pulkeshi. Pulkeshi Gaikwad.
Yes, myself Pulkeshi Gaikwad. I am going to speak for the topic that is reservation in the jobs for natives of the state. First of all, reservation is never about merit. It is about the representation in the system. And native people of the state have the right to be represented in their own state. Again, secondly, the state has the responsibility to provide for its native people. And native people, already in the states like Maharashtra, there is 80% reservations for the native people in labor class. This native peoples, if they don't get reservations in the jobs, they will have to move out of their state, and this will eventually hurt the culture of the state. Again, the main reason for this reservation is that agrarian sector of the state is under stress, and the youth of the states are trying to move to other sectors. And if there's a reservation for them in their own state, they could get a nice job, and the economic state of the state, economic condition of the state can improve. Again, there are again the language act, language thing, which comes under the Article 16, Part 2, in which certain states require language for getting jobs. For example, in Maharashtra, Marathi is compulsory. In West Bengal, they need Bangla for getting jobs, and for which the locals are morely efficient. That's it.
Okay. So you're done with your point? Okay, I'll go to Piyush. Piyush Pathak.
Yes, sir.
Please.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Piyush Pathak. I am an engineering student, engineer by training, and I was preparing for the civil services, right now seeking a job. I'll speak against the motion that reservation for natives is not a good idea. First of all, let us start with the original objective behind reservation. When the original constitution was devised, the idea for providing reservation was to provide a quota-based affirmation to address some of the historical injustices that were met to the certain castes and certain social sections of the society. And it was not meant to provide a special status to any category. It was just to provide a level playing field so that those who are historically disadvantaged can, the further generations can uh, uh, claim their rightful status, their rightful place in the job scenario, in the education scenario. Secondly, it was not intended as a permanent feature. So we have some questions. The first question which props up is whether the updation of criteria of reservation has there been any updation, because the last time this criteria was defined was 90 years. So the criteria was last defined in 1931, and the people who were disadvantaged may not necessarily be disadvantaged today. Secondly, we should talk about the benefits. What are the visible benefits of providing reservation over the past many years? And has there been an exit policy defined for the people who are now, they have gained for their reservation and they can become a normal category? The third is that there are new different forms of inequalities. The most prominent is digital divide, which is not social, economic, rural, urban divides, but gender divides, but digital divides. Uh, my case is that reservation is not a panacea, and reservation is not just the only way to improve economy. First of all, reservation for natives violates the constitutional provisions. It violates Article 16. Supreme Court has said in many judgments that you cannot claim reservation as a right. Secondly, it impacts unity and diversity. The economic survey has readily mentioned that the empowered action group, or the Bimaru Rajya
30
of
seconds to
India.
go.
Okay.
Hmm.
They are the source of migration in the western and southern developed countries. So which is also an aging population. So this is the population which will provide the young working capital for the southern and western states. It also promotes the idea of one nation, one market.
I'll repeat same cycle once again. So we'll go to Divit first. So Divit, you may start with your opinion on what your opponents has said, and then someone can ask you a question. Okay?
Right, sir. Can I start?
Yes, you can start.
Yes. So first of all, my opinion on what respected Dipansh has said is that first of all, lack of educational facilities and technological facilities for locals in underdeveloped states and the underlying problem of poverty means that they cannot get an equal access to skill-based learning and development. Hence, reservations are required for them. Secondly, Piyush stated that reservations violate Article 16. That is wrong, since Article 16 subclause 3 is a provision that provides for reservations. Second of all, reservation terms were last defined in 1969 under the Mandal Commission, not in 1931, which exclusively observed social and economically backward classes and OBCs. Hence, your argument is based on factual wrongs and hence cannot be, in this case, upheld. Thank you.
Okay, so anyone want to ask a question?
Yeah, I have a question. This is
Deepansh or
Piyush.
Piyush.
Yeah, I have a question
Achha,
for
Deepansh.
David.
Okay.
So, even if you're ready to give them reservation, what guarantees that the state has enough money by giving them reservation to even give them better skill and training facilities? These training facilities can be availed in any other state which more proficient in that industry, rather than asking them to develop a separate industry within the state itself. What will be more cost efficient?
Right, sir. Sir, my simple answer to you is that if we only direct the attention of all underprivileged people to a single state having strong training facilities and having strong educational facilities, what that will mean is that only one state will be responsible for a greater fraction of growth of the economy of our country. That means that that state will be monopolized in all fields of industry in that respective sense. Hence, those other states will lag behind. What we aim for economic development is the economic development of all states, not a singular state or two states.
Okay, so we'll not take a counter arguments. We'll leave the answers to jury actually. Now we'll go to Ananya.
Yes, sir. Can I begin?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so both my opponents, that is respected Dipansh and Piyush, have made a lot of points about reservation, and how reservation has not been revised per se. But those reservations are not at all what we're talking about here. Reservation for OBC, reservation for women, all that is a separate issue. We're talking about reservations for natives, and that is very important in a situation where globalization is increasing so much and people are getting displaced left, right, and center. Reservation for the natives is absolutely necessary to prevent a lot of issues.
Okay, so who had the question? Dipansh or Piyush?
I have a question for
Okay,
Ananya.
yeah, Piyush.
Uh, Ananya, you say that the natives are at a disadvantage in a state, and that's why they need reservation. But don't you think that the free hand they should be left to the free hand of the market? And if suppose taking the example that the tribals are being displaced whenever a corporate company is coming up, so they can always there's always a provision of CSR and providing the blue collar jobs to the native tribals of the state. So that does not necessarily require reservation. The labor which is readily available there, it will be absorbed by the company instead of importing labor from a different state. This is about the availability of labor, because as the migration trends tell us that it is mostly the empowered action groups which are providing cheaper labor in the developed states such as Maharashtra or maybe Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. So it's about the free hand of market. There is a demand and there is a supply, and they
Sir,
are
I'm
meeting
sorry,
each
what's
other.
your question?
I'm asking you, can should they not be left to the free hand of market? When you say that the natives are at a disadvantage, how can somebody be at a disadvantage in their own state? Maybe they are getting better jobs, or maybe they are not ready to work there.
Sir, in answer to that, you're saying how are natives disadvantaged in their own state? I'm going to ask you a
Yes,
very simple question. You said, are reservations still needed? Are reservations still relevant? I am going to ask you, is there equality?
that's what my question is. Is reservation the only way to ensure equality, or should free competition, ensure equality? You can
Sir,
provide a
free
level.
competition is valid when there is a level playing field, but there is no level playing field. There are people who are at a disadvantage, and there are people who are at an advantage, either by virtue of their birth or by virtue of their family or whatever. So, in such situations, reservations are necessary, yes.
But the topic of debate is reservation in jobs. If we have
Hmm.
to provide a level playing field, we can provide such in cases of education, which is readily available. I'm not against the idea of reservation. I'm against the idea that the natives are at a disadvantage in their own state,
So
and
basically,
somebody.
he wants to say actually, he wants to say that see, being a native of the state, people are already having advantage or being
Exactly.
from that state,
They have their
from that
contacts and
state.
everything.
Why then additional regulation needed to give them reservation actually? Because
Sir,
multiple.
like I just gave one example, sir, of the migrant crisis where the mineral for the mineral mining, the locals are displaced. So there may be so many examples of that where people are not even the people who are being displaced from there may not be even hired in the blue collar jobs. Why else would so many states be enforcing this law? I'm pretty sure it was not without any reason. Obviously, the locals are not getting enough representation in the companies. The private sector has never enforced these reservations before. Only the public sector has, but obviously that has not been enough, which is why the private sector is also now being forced to take in the reservation for the locals.
Okay, so got your point. We'll not go for counter argument. Basically, you want to say that since when industrialization happens, local people suffers in different ways in terms of relocation or in terms of maybe sometimes health issues
Health
as well because
issues,
of yeah.
economic issues, relocation
So
issues.
so they need to give preferences. This is your point, I guess.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So now I'll go to Dipansh.
All right.
Yeah.
The reason proposition loses this debate is because they concede that they want reservation for people who have health problems, economic problems. These are already covered under reservation. It's about giving people reservation just because they are natives of that state. They haven't talked about this at all. Reason for representation, no other reason other than the fact that they live in that state, right? The question is not that everyone will move to the same state. Just like a company works, a manager takes managerial decisions. You've got diplomats and CEOs taking the bigger financial decisions, and then the workers and the labor. You can't ask every one of them to specialize in everything. Similarly, every state has its specialities. You can't ask them to develop everything. It will be absolutely impractical. But lastly, Private sector has absolutely no incentive to give any reservation, right? The government is accountable to its people and therefore they go ahead with reservation. Private sector is accountable to one word, that is called profits. If they get a better applicant who will be much more better for their company, they will go ahead and take that applicant. Why should there be a burden placed upon the private sector to also align with reservation? They haven't talked about this at all. We think the reason they will lose this debate is simply because reservation happens on certain criteria. Either they have to be persons with disabilities, economically backward, or they have to belong to a particular scheduled caste or scheduled tribe. All of this provisions already exist. Why do they have to be reserved on the basis of the state that they live in? Not one reason has come out apart from the fact that there are already states following this policy. That is not a good enough reason for you to justify it. Give a justification, then you can win this debate.
Okay, so
Sir, can
Ananya
I
and
please
David,
take this?
yes. So
Yes,
Ananya and
sir.
David both has a question. So I'll first Ananya, you can ask
Yes,
question.
sir. Dipansh ji, you have continuously said that the health issues are not bad enough, or that you specifically mentioned that the private sector is under no burden to provide reservations. Sir, I ask you, when you're a corporation going into a new state and you want to establish, where do you get your funding from?
From private investors and loans from banks.
Sir, banks are government banks. Those banks are government banks. They are public sector banks. When you're taking money from the public sector banks, if the public sector is providing a reservation, you can also provide a reservation for the same reason. You're taking the funding from public sector banks. Secondly, I would like to ask you, are you aware that there are migrant labor crises in multiple parts of the world? In multiple states in India? Do you know about the sweatshop crises, where there are people being brought in from Nepal to work at dirt cheap prices, or there are things like that? Are you aware of all these things?
All right, now
No,
here,
no, just a yes or no question. Are you aware
yeah,
of all these things?
you finish with your question, as many questions as you want, and then I'll answer them.
Okay, sir, if you're aware of all these things, you will understand that if these people are provided jobs in their own places of origin, this issue wouldn't arise at all. And obviously, you don't agree with me. So, my question to you is, what is your solution for fighting the migrant labor crisis?
Okay,
All
Dipansh counter.
All right. Now we need to understand that just because I'm taking a money from a bank does not mean that I have to follow every policy that the institution holders of the bank do that, right? If I take a loan from a bank, it doesn't mean that because bank provides cash to other people, I also have to provide cash to other people. It's just a matter that most of the bigger banks in India are nationalized. Most private sector enterprises operate on the basis of profit and do not operate on the basis of democracy or of liberty that the government has to preside over. That is the government's responsibility. Please don't mix both of them.
Sir, can I
Second,
just make
Okay,
one
okay,
last?
okay.
let me answer your
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Secondly, the migrant labor crisis. The migrant labor crisis does not arise from the fact that you absolutely have no, let's say in where you're going. It's because there are no jobs for you to fill in your states in the first place. What will you reserve for these people? If there were jobs, these people are living in those states, they would have easily gone and availed of those jobs in the first place. The fact that they don't have adequate jobs existing in their states is why they have to move. Now, if you give them reservation in a different state where they might find jobs, they won't get jobs over there also, and your first state didn't have jobs. Anyway, they will be stuck between a dark hole wherein they have absolutely no avenue to create a standard of living for themselves.
Okay, Dipansh. So Ananya, if you have any counter, you skip for concluding round. There you can include.
Okay, sir. No problem.
That.
Thank you, sir.
So David, you had a
Yes.
question.
Yes. So Dipansh, as our fellow participant Piyush highlighted about how historical injustices have to be addressed through reservations.
So your question is from Dipansh or Piyush?
No, my question is from Dipansh only. I'm just citing an example. Yeah. So he talked about how historical injustices have to be resolved with reservations. That's why reservations are brought up. And you talked about certain states have progressing better in certain fields or certain industries. Now, where does historical injustice start from? One person from one state or one state being preferred over the other over a period or a course of time, creating a loop in which only that person gets better opportunities in that field. So how are you going to address that very problem when reservations are made for countering historical injustices and you're creating historical injustices, more and more of them, for which you will need more and more reservations, and you will go in a countless cycle where you get stuck yourself. So how are you going to address historical injustices if a person, say, if one state excels in one industry and a person from another state wants to take part in that very industry or wants to take part in that very profession and doesn't get the opportunities to do so, how will you address that problem?
Precisely my whole debate. If your state is not good in at automobile manufacturing, Maharashtra is, I will move from UP to Maharashtra and go and seek a job over there. That is exactly how you counter injustice, right? You are making sure that injustice more prevails by asking that person that you can't move out of this state, and if you want a job, take a job within the state itself, irrespective of whether your state has an automobile industry or not in the first place. This is how you counter injustice, right? By providing more freedom to these people, not curbing the freedom as a whole. Because if you keep on curbing the freedom, the problems that these people already face are only going to accentuate. Allow them to have the freedom of existing in a free market, of applying to jobs wherever the hell they want, and then ask them to get admission to jobs on the basis of the merit that they have, and not on the basis of the fact that because they live in a particular state, they have to rot in that particular state, irrespective of whether they have any job opportunities there or not.
Okay, now I'll go to Shambhavi. Shambhavi, you are ready with your argument?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
First of all, I'd like to clarify that when we're mentioning of state, we don't have to talk about particular regions or anything, but we're talking of as a country. And then financial and social disadvantage proves the need for reservation for natives. And the statement that our opposition is stating that natives will be curbed, they will be forced to take up a job in that very state, it's not true. They are free to go wherever they want. They don't have to take up if the automobile sector is not in my state, then I can move from another to another state. I don't have to. But in case I am not specialized anywhere else, or a person cannot immigrate and they need a job to keep them financially stable, if we provide reservation, then we can allow them to do that. They can fulfill that. They won't have to immigrate. The migrant labor crisis will be solved by providing them reservation. It can be, and a minimum skill set can be set as a requirement for providing any before in any reservation, which will ensure that no people are they have to work for the job they are getting. They don't get it for free. And so people in the state do not get enough jobs because of infiltration, and this happens on the country as a whole also. That if a company is getting, if the government is getting a cheaper labor, then we won't then any company they hire the cheaper labor from another state or another country, and they won't be providing jobs to natives, which is why reservation is needed for natives.
Okay, so Shambhavi is taking the case as a country actually. So if anyone has any counter for her, any question?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Deepansh.
Yes.
Even if we take your definition, Shambhavi ma'am, about it being a country or an international level crisis that you're talking about, US is the major pioneer in electronics industry. China builds the most smartphones of anywhere else. They provide cheaper alternatives to anywhere else you can find. Keeping that in mind that they are the technological innovators, if you ask every state to limit reservation and most of their jobs to the natives of the state, how do you think that we will be able to share technological know-how, and how do you think that diplomatic relations between these countries will form then?
I think technical know-how can be easily shared, and we don't have to make the most of the jobs reserves. We only have to ensure a minimum number of jobs reserved, so that the natives, do not have to face problems when other people are getting jobs. And can you repeat your other question?
How will diplomatic channels be formed, considering that every state is now prioritizing its own citizens over the others, even though they might be more meritorious?
So basically, he
Yes,
wants to say, yes, sorry, please. If you got the question, then please continue.
diplomatic relations don't have to form through by allowing other people, by preferring other more meritorious people while ignoring our natives. We can always form diplomatic relations with while sharing technical know-how. There will be people who will be willing to go to the other state or the country, and they will be sharing knowledge. It's not limited. The people will have the choice whether they want to take the reserved jobs or not.
Okay, so diplomatic relations cannot be built only basis migration of skill set of people. It can be done through other ways as well. Okay, so I'll go to Pulkeshi. Pulkeshi,
Uh,
you're ready with argument?
yeah.
Yes, please.
First of all, like this Dipesh said, people don't need to apply. If the reservation is provided in a state, people don't need to apply in that state only. They can go to other state. Reservation is not about 100% reserving jobs for the natives only. It's about a definite percent. For example, like 50% jobs are only reserved. So a person gets a choice to go to other state or not go to other state or work in his own state. If he's skilled in some other thing and he can apply to a job in other state, like you said, like for automobiles he can go to other state. And one more thing, uh, reservation is about representation. Native people of a definite state need their own representation in their state's jobs. It's not about taking other people's job, it's about getting themselves jobs.
Okay. So, Piyush, I have one question to left to ask. Piyush, you want to ask question?
Pulakeshi, you are saying that reservation is not about merit, it is about the right to be represented. Don't you think it has been a pampered idea? Because if we want reservation for the natives, 100% open competition would be the best scenario.
No, see, if we have 100% open competition, then also there is no equality in our nation. We first need everyone to be on an equal platform. Then only we can have a 100% open thing.
So what
And
you're
the
trying to
natives,
okay, sorry. Yeah,
no,
please
no,
continue.
continue.
You're
No, no, continue.
you're trying to justify that reservation is the only solution to address inequality.
See, it's not the only solution, but it is an important solution because if there is no platform for the people, how would they come forward?
So, Piyush, now your turn, and Pulkeshi and Shambhavi may ask a question to you.
Okay. I would like to conclude whatever I've gathered from my opponents. There have been two big misconceptions. The first misconception is that reservation is the panache. It is the ultimate idea to address inequality, economic inequality. Reservation may have been conceived originally as an idea to address injustice, but not inequality. Inequality can only be addressed by progress, by development. Second misconception is that reservation is the only way to address a falling economy or to address the the falling GDP or something like that. This was not a direct idea, but this has been an inferred idea. I would like to conclude by saying that reservation is against the idea of one nation and one market. The idea of states itself is very fluid. Article 2 and 3 can ready in the constitution can readily destroy the idea of boundaries or states. So by providing reservation to natives, we are unnecessarily pampering an idea by first of all, we are losing the original mandate for which it was introduced. Secondly, we are destroying the integrity of the country by promoting narrow-mindedness, by promoting parochialism. And thirdly, as my one of my friends said, that it is against the idea of ease of doing business, because the private industries, if they do not find the right talent and if they have a compulsion to just like everyone put the case of Haryana, if in Gurgaon and Faridabad, where most of the MNCs are located in Haryana state, if there is a mandatory condition to provide 75% or some quantity of reservation, the companies may find it more convenient to fly away, and it will lead to flight of investment, and that would further hurt the inequality more than the idea of reservation itself.
Okay, so Pulkeshi and Shambhavi may ask a question to you. So, Shambhavi.
Yeah, first of all, we never stated the first two things that you have said, and reservation was actually introduced to promote equality, not injustice, because injustice has been done and there was no solution because the caste system had been officially abolished, but it was still in practice. And reservation was introduced to uplift the lower castes to an equal level so that people can have equal access to opportunities and such. And the second thing that you're saying, that private companies have to be forced and there will be a flight of investment. That is what we are aiming at, that the natives should get a minimum percentage of job reserved in private companies also, so that if the companies want to stay, they have to promote our natives. They cannot crush them. The tribal people example is very true, because they get immigrated and private companies bring in cheaper labor from other states, and the tribal people are left with no compensation or something that is negligible with their laws. How do you explain that?
Shambhavi, if first of all, if the tribals are not getting adequate compensation, it is not because that the reservation could have been a better alternative. It is because the government is failing to ensure protection to them, which must be provided. First of all, secondly, when you say, can you repeat your other questions? You asked me
You're
three, four.
saying that private companies, well, there will be a flight of investment if private
Yeah.
companies are
Okay.
forced
Okay.
to introduce natives,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
that's what we're addressing. That they, if they want to retain their service in our country or in the state, then they need to give reservations to natives, so that, and if there is a, because they always do that, they bring in cheaper labors from other states, and the natives do not get adequate representation or jobs, and this leads to them forcing them to immigrate, and where there are many who cannot immigrate, and they are turned to
Okay.
land as laborers
Okay.
or something.
See, the root of the problem is in the difference of labor laws, which are prevalent in many states, and the absence of labor laws in many states. At least not in at least in practice, if not on paper. So the idea has been, you must be aware that the government is in the process of codifying around 44 labor laws to simplify them into 4 codes, and that would ensure that you get a uniform supply of labor across the country. Again, justifying the point of one nation, one market. It is not the absence of cheap labor, or denying the labor to a native. The company wants to get the work done at a minimum price. Minimum price is not unjust price. It has to also meet the minimum wages code, but the company is also looking for profit motive. So if the natives are not being provided jobs, the idea is to provide a uniform labor code, ensure under the CSR activity that the labor natives are being provided the jobs. And that's what many companies are doing. Whenever they displace the tribals from the location, they ensure that the tribals are being provided in the whatever according to their skill set, whatever jobs they can be provided, whether it is blue collar jobs, or obviously they cannot be absorbed into white collar without the adequate educational attainments, but they are being provided blue collar jobs. And if they are not being provided, it is a governance issue. Reservation cannot address this.
Okay.
Reservation can address this, that because tribals are not, certainly they are immigrated, they are forced to immigrate, the companies get cheaper labor from other state, forcing and as you said, it is not in practice that they are giving minimum wages or things like that. And reservation can address the issue, as it will provide the tribals with the reservations. The companies will have to provide them with jobs. They
Okay,
cannot force
Shambhavi.
them to immigrate.
Okay, so rest of the points you can keep for conclusion round. We'll go to Pulkeshi. Pulkeshi, if you have any questions,
Yes,
yes.
like Dipanshu just said, like the companies bring cheap labor from outside. If the companies bring cheap labor, then how will the native people get jobs? They also need jobs. So that's the whole reason we need representation in the system, so that the native people can get jobs. And now only you said that tribal people are provided with jobs, but they are not given proper jobs and all. If there is a reservation, they will automatically be forced, the companies will be automatically forced to give them the job.
First of all, you cannot force the companies. See, if you are in a country, if you are forcing either the companies or the tribals, this is against the spirit of free competition and obviously the rights and dignity of the tribals which are being forced. Firstly, you cannot force the company to provide a less skilled person, or a person who is demanding more money for the same amount of job. The company will simply fly. Okay. Secondly, the tribals, if the tribals are not being given adequate compensation, it is the responsibility of the state government. If suppose I am the chief minister of Maharashtra and there is a company, a corporate, which wants to establish a mining activity, then I have to strike a deal with him that, okay, a certain amount of jobs you will have to provide to those people who are being displaced as a part of CSR, as a part of the corporate social responsibility of the company, because you are snatching their land, you are snatching their livelihoods. They must be practicing some sort of agriculture in that land, or they must be earning from the minor forest produces from that land. So you have to provide them adequate either compensation so that they can start a new fresh livelihood, or you have to provide them the opportunity to participate in the labor. That cannot be counted as reservation. When you mandate reservation, you are saying that if I can get cheaper labor from another state or from another city, I have to discard that idea and I have to necessarily take the costly labor. That is unnecessarily pampering the idea of reservation and keeping that does not address the developmental issues. I'm
See, you
that's
don't have to
Okay.
100% get labor from outside. You can
Mhm.
get labor from outside and also take the natives. If there's
Mhm.
a reservation, you have
Yeah.
to take the natives
So
in certain amount also, na?
yeah, you
So
you
that
must be
will
aware,
get them also employed,
that
na?
when the companies displace anybody, whether it is in a city or suppose if the metro construction work is going there and they have to displace a house or a corporate or a building, then they are required to pay adequate compensation. The same
Okay.
applies
Yeah.
to the tribals.
Yeah. So now let's move to the next section. So concluding round. यहाँ पे सबको अपना एक concluding speech देना है. So you all are having 1 minute time to give the speech. Okay. So I'll start with the same cycle. David first.
Yes, sir. Can I start?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
My conclusion would be that the opposition's arguments are only creating a migrant labor crisis, as stated by many of my fellow participants. That migrant labor crisis, it's deepening the migrant labor crisis and it's taking it to a point where it cannot be solved. Second of all, why does, for example, a state like Maharashtra have highest sugarcane production when it doesn't have access to the maximum suitable soil and climate required for sugarcane cultivation? Because of better labor facilities and better educational facilities. Underutilization of resources occurs in such a case when you're actively encouraging migrant laborers, resulting in a situation such as Venezuela, which possesses the world's maximum crude oil reserves and yet is one of the poorest countries in the world. The reason for this is the underutilization of resources, which will actively take place in states which have lesser access to education and technological facilities, but greater resources for a particular industry. And this underutilization will cause a great damage to the economy of our country. Hence the reason why states have called for domicile reservation, because they know the economic impacts that will be there of aggravating a migrant labor crisis on the economy of our country. Thank you.
Okay. Ananya.
Yes, sir. I have a few very concrete points to make here. Number one, when we talk about reservation for natives, we're talking primarily about blue collar jobs, not about automobile engineering jobs. Those are white collar jobs. And secondly, we're not talking about 100% reservation. If you're going to keep 50% reservation for the natives, all the natives of that state will be fighting it out in that 50% only. Okay. Secondly, where we are talking about meritocracy, open competition, please, meritocracy is an idealist fantasy. You cannot enforce it. There are always people who will leverage power or influence or money to get ahead. And in such situations, some kind of reservation is always required. Now, the next point is reservation may not be the only solution, but it is a solution that we know has worked in the past, which is why this reservation for jobs for natives is also required. Next, flight of investment. What most people don't realize is that local labor, that is hiring labor from natives, is actually cheaper than getting the labor out from some other place. So it is not a flight of investment, it is actually an increase of profit to hire the natives. The last point I'd like to make here is that locals interacting with locals is the best thing. You're much likelier to trust somebody who's from your geographical region. So, suppose you're having a sugarcane plant, it is better to hire somebody from the locality because they know the land, they know the people, so it makes interactions better. So, this is a case I would like to make for having reservations in jobs for the natives. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go to Divansh.
My arguments are threefold in a conclusion. Firstly, if the problem that you have is that a state does not have technological and educational facilities, go build them. Pressurize the government to build educational facilities. How is reservation for native individuals helping you build educational institutions, right? And by your own logic, these are people who are anyway below the poverty line. How are they going to help you build institutions? Secondly, you say that merit is an idealistic fantasy. I say that's the most concrete form of judgment that you have, because that is directly how you can evaluate who is going to be the most productive for your company. You can't evaluate productivity on the basis of where a person comes from. Secondly, you can basically judge a person's acumen by asking them questions, looking at their reports, rather than asking them to prove whether or not they existed on this land for hundreds of years ago, right? This is literally the case of NRC. People in those poor areas don't even have proper documentation to prove that they are a part of that native state. How are you going to make sure you're solving that problem? They have absolutely no idea. Most reasons that they give for the justification of reservation are already incorporated within the Constitution of India, be it be financial or health-based facilities. They are already taken care of. Why should I be given a reservation just because I belong to a particular state? No reasons at all. At best, they are saying that there are locals, let them interact with each other. This is the whole problem, right? We want a free market. Let people learn from each other. Let people learn from different experiences in different states. Why do you want to limit the growth and development of these people? Go ahead and answer that question for us. All of this keeping in mind, we need to make sure that the reservation needs to be looked at as something that is taking care of historical injustices and not being doled out at 50 or 70% exorbitant rates to whoever just has a certificate to prove that he belongs to a particular state. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go to Shambhavi.
You cannot say that reservation was introduced to address historical injustice. It was very clearly introduced to provide them with equality and to uplift them. And second, the question that the opposition has been repeating, that how are we going to solve the social and financial disadvantages by introducing reservation, is that if we introduce reservation, people will be getting more jobs, they will be more financially stable, which will be directly contributing to the per capita income, and will in turn lead to the better facilities. If the people of if the state is more economically stable, then they have better facilities, and we cannot force the government to build things without money. And the flight of investment is not going to be as big an issue as you make it seem to be, because if the company is forcing the natives to immigrate and they are not getting adequate compensation, it is not a government problem because of many bribing and other corruption issues. And the flight of they get, and it mainly happens because the companies are allowed to get cheaper labor from other states. But if we introduce reservation, then they cannot do so, and they will have to fix a minimum number of jobs for the natives, which will ensure that the natives aren't forced to immigrate and they are staying where they are while getting jobs. And introducing them to bigger companies and providing them with job opportunities will only help them in more exchange and cultural exchanges, and they won't have to go to other states or immigrate. And overall, it will be solving the migration issue. And underutilizing of resources is something that happens when we are focusing on other things. So suppose if the natives are getting the jobs, they have a better idea of the resources there and how it can be utilized. They have better ideas of the problems the company will be facing there. So overall, reservations should be introduced.
Okay. Pulkeshi.
State has responsibility to provide for its native people. Reservation is not about merit, it is about representation of the native people in the system. Natives are the one who preserve the culture of the state. If there is no representation for them in the job system, they will be initially forced to leave their native places in search for job opportunities, and this will lead to the cultural damage of the state. And as one participant said, that the open market is an option. Open market is not an option because there is no equality in the facilities provided to all people. So reservation is important. Reservation may not be the only option to curb this inequality, but reservation is a great option, and therefore reservation should be provided to the native people of the state. Thank you.
Okay. Piyush.
I think we are fairly romanticizing the idea of reservation as the panacea or the ultimate solution for everything which is wrong with our economy. First of all, let me again reiterate the fact that reservation was indeed introduced to address historical social injustices to some castes, and gradually it was promoted. It was extended to include economical inequalities and everything. But let reservation serve its original purpose. We have a few questions to ask. First is whether reservation has served us any good, whether the people who were provided the benefit are actually doing better off, or are they still, at the mercy. Secondly, we are when we are saying that we have to provide reservation for the natives, we are violating the constitution. Supreme Court has said in times and again that reservation cannot be claimed as a matter of right. In the Indira Sahni justice, the judgment, it has readily said that reservation cannot exceed the 50% quota cap, which is being violated. Secondly, I am of the opinion that the government should stop playing the role of a parent, and it should instead act as an enabler. If there are problems with the labor laws, then you should reform the labor laws. If the public is not getting adequate health and education facilities, or they are not able to stand up to the fair competition, then let the government provide them quality education, the quality health care, like we have the Delhi model of education, where the people are now preferring government schools more than private schools because of a very good quality of education at a lower price. So let the government act as an enabler. It should enable the people to for the ease of doing business, and all the labor reforms and education and health facilities, so that the people can stand up as in a fair competition, as fairly able individuals, and not take the benefit of reservation or something to justify that.
Okay. Yeah. So with Piyush, I'm concluding the debate. It was actually excellent debate. I enjoyed it. A lot of strong points from everyone actually. So it was fulfilling actually. Thank you. Thank you for
Being
being with
there.
us. Yeah.
And
Thank you
Yeah.
for being with
happy
us.
Republic Day
Okay.
to
Happy
everybody.
Republic
Yeah.
Day. Yeah.